I wasn't supposed to find the key. It wasn't even hidden well, which made it worse. It was just there, sitting in the small ceramic tray Ethan kept by the door, the one we used for loose change, receipts, and things we didn't want to think about. Except this wasn't ours. It didn't match anything. Different shape, different metal, no tag. And the moment I picked it up, something in my chest tightened in a way I couldn't explain. Because Ethan didn't lose things. He didn't forget things. He didn't have random anything. Ethan was the kind of man who color-coded his calendar, who planned vacations 6 months in advance, who reminded me to drink water when I forgot. He was stable, predictable, safe. That's why I said yes when he proposed. That's why we were getting married in 6 days. And that's why that key felt like a crack in something I didn't even realize could break. I turned it over in my fingers, staring at it longer than I should have. "Everything okay?" His voice came from behind me, calm as always. I flinched slightly, closing my hand around the key before turning. "Yeah," I said quickly. "Just cleaning up." He walked over, loosening his tie, his expression soft but observant. Ethan always noticed things. That was another thing I loved about him, or thought I loved. His eyes flicked to my hand. "Find something?" For a second, I considered lying. But I didn't. I opened my palm and held it out. "What's this for?" There was a pause. Not long, not dramatic, just enough. And if you weren't paying attention, you'd miss it. "Oh," he said casually, taking the key from me. "That's for storage." "Storage?" I repeated. "Yeah, small unit near my office. Old stuff, work files, some furniture I didn't want to throw out." He shrugged like it was nothing, dropping the key back into the tray, like it had always belonged there, like I was the one making it weird. I nodded slowly, but something didn't sit right. "Since when do you have a storage unit?" "Couple years," he said, already walking toward the kitchen. "Before we moved in together. Couple years. We'd been together for 3, and I'd never heard of it. Not once. Not when we packed up his old place. Not when we went through every box, every drawer, deciding what to keep, what to donate, what to throw away. Ethan had been thorough, almost too thorough. So why would he keep a storage unit and never mention it?" "You've never talked about it," I said, following him. He grabbed a glass, filling it with water. Didn't seem important. Didn't seem important. I leaned against the counter, watching him. "Can I see it?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. And this time, the pause was longer. He didn't look at me right away. Just stood there, holding the glass, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "It's messy," he said finally. "You'd hate it. I've seen your closet." I joked lightly. "I think I'll survive." A small smile, controlled. "Maybe after the wedding," he said. "Right now things are kind of crazy." That was true. Final dress fittings, guest confirmations, family flying in. Everything was chaos. But still, "Yeah," I said slowly. "After the wedding." He nodded, relieved just a little. And that's when I knew. Something was off. Not big enough to name. Not obvious enough to confront. But there, like a splinter under the skin. I tried to forget about it. I really did. I told myself I was overthinking. That not everything had to mean something. That Ethan was allowed to have parts of his life that didn't involve me. That was healthy, right? Boundaries, privacy, normal. Except Ethan wasn't a private person. Not like that. He told me everything. Or at least I thought he did. But over the next 2 days, little things started stacking up in ways I couldn't ignore. Started with his phone. Not that he was hiding it, he wasn't. But he was aware of it. More than usual. If it buzzed, he checked it instantly. If I was near, he angled the screen slightly away. Small movements. Subtle. But once you noticed them, you couldn't unsee them. Then there were the late nights. "Work's crazy right now," he'd say, grabbing his keys. "Just a few more days." And I believed him. First. But on the 3rd night, something changed. He kissed me goodbye at the door, same as always. "Don't wait up," he said. I won't, I replied, smiling. But I did. I waited 10 minutes. Then I grabbed my keys. And I followed him. I don't know what I expected. Maybe I thought I'd catch him grabbing a drink with coworkers. Or staying late at the office like he said. Something normal. Something explainable. But Ethan didn't drive toward his office. He turned in the opposite direction. And kept going. My grip tightened on the steering wheel as I followed at a distance. My heart beating faster with every turn. Where are you going? I whispered to myself. He drove for almost 20 minutes. Through parts of the city we didn't usually go. Past restaurants, apartment buildings, quiet streets. Until finally he slowed. And pulled into a small, dimly lit parking lot. My stomach dropped. Because this wasn't an office. It wasn't a bar. It wasn't anything I recognized. It was an apartment complex. Not new. Not nice. Just there. Ethan parked near the back. I pulled over farther down the street, killing my headlights. My pulse was loud in my ears as I watched him step out of the car. For a second, he just stood there, looking around, like he was making sure no one was watching. And then he walked inside. I sat there, frozen. Every logical explanation I'd built in my head started collapsing one by one. Storage unit. Work. Late nights. None of it fit anymore. I stared at the building, my hands gripping the wheel so tight they hurt. Don't do this, I whispered. Don't jump to conclusions. But my body was already moving. Before I could talk myself out of it. Before I could stop. I got out of the car. The air felt colder than it should have as I walked toward the building. My footsteps quiet, but my heartbeat deafening. The door was slightly open, like someone hadn't fully closed it. I hesitated for a second, just one, because I knew, once I stepped inside, there was no going back. Whatever I found would change everything. I pushed the door open and walked in. The hallway smelled like old carpet and cigarette smoke. Not strong enough to be overwhelming, but enough to cling to the air. The kind of smell apartment buildings get after years of strangers passing through them without really living there. I stood just inside the entrance, listening. Somewhere upstairs, a TV played softly. Pipes rattled behind the walls. A dog barked once and then stopped. Everything felt painfully normal, and somehow that made it worse. Because Ethan didn't belong in a place like this. Not because he was above it, he'd never act that way, but because it didn't fit him. Ethan liked clean spaces, organized spaces, minimalist furniture, expensive candles, kitchens nobody actually cooked in. This building felt messy, temporary, hidden. I looked toward the stairs, then toward the elevator. My chest tightened as reality finally started catching up to me. What am I doing? I whispered, because there was still time to leave. Still time to get back in my car and pretend none of this happened. I could go home, crawl into bed, let Ethan come back later with some polished explanation about helping a coworker or handling some secret surprise for the wedding. And maybe I'd believe him. Maybe I wanted to believe him, but my feet moved anyway. I climbed the stairs slowly, careful not to make noise. Every step felt louder than it should have. My heartbeat syncing with the dull thud of my shoes against the concrete. Second floor. Third. Then I stopped, because I heard his voice. Muffled. Closed. I froze instantly, staring down the dim hallway. One of the apartment doors near the end was cracked open slightly, warm light spilling into the corridor. And Ethan was inside. I moved closer carefully, every instinct screaming at me to turn around. Then I heard him laugh. Not the polite laugh he used around coworkers. Not the soft, controlled one he used at dinner parties. A real laugh. Comfortable. Familiar. My stomach twisted violently. I stepped closer to the doorway. And then I heard another voice. A woman. I stopped breathing for a second. She said something too quiet to make out, and Ethan answered immediately, his tone softer than I'd heard in weeks. No. No, no, no. My pulse pounded in my ears as my brain scrambled for another explanation. Sister. Coworker. Friend. Anything. Please. I moved just enough to see through the opening. And the first thing I noticed wasn't the woman. It was the apartment itself. It looked lived in. Not temporary, not secretive. There were shoes by the couch, a blanket tossed carelessly over one armrest, a half-finished cup of coffee on the table, and photos, framed photos. My chest tightened painfully. Then the woman stepped into view. She looked around my age. Dark hair tied up loosely, oversized sweatshirt, no makeup. Not glamorous, not intimidating, normal, which somehow hurt more. She smiled at something Ethan said, and he reached out automatically, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear like it was muscle memory, like he'd done it 100 times. I physically stepped backward. My body reacted before my brain could. The hallway suddenly felt too small, too hot. This wasn't a one-night thing. This wasn't random. This was a life. A whole separate life. I pressed a hand against the wall to steady myself as nausea rolled through me. Then something small darted across the apartment behind them. A little girl, maybe 5 or 6, barefoot, holding a stuffed dinosaur. She ran straight toward Ethan, and he caught her instantly, like he'd done it 1,000 times before. "Easy, monkey," he laughed. "Monkey." My knees almost gave out. The girl wrapped her arms around his neck while Ethan smiled. Really smiled, in a way I hadn't seen in months. And then she said it. "Daddy." The word hit me like a car crash. Everything inside me went cold. Not boyfriend, not uncle, Daddy. I stared through the crack in the door while my entire world rearranged itself in real time. Because there's betrayal, and then there's this. This wasn't cheating. This wasn't some affair hidden behind hotel rooms and lies. This was another family, another home, another version of him. And judging by the way he looked standing there with that little girl in his arms, this version was real. I don't know how long I stood there before my body finally moved again. I backed away slowly, terrified one of them would look toward the door. My breathing had turned shallow and uneven, my vision blurring at the edges. I needed to leave, now, before I completely lost it. I turned and walked quickly down the hallway, forcing myself not to run. But just as I reached the stairwell door, "Excuse me," I froze. An older woman stood halfway down the hall carrying groceries, staring at me suspiciously. "You looking for someone?" My mouth opened, but nothing came out. Think. I think I have the wrong apartment," I managed weakly. Her expression softened slightly. "Who were you trying to find?" My throat tightened, because I almost said his name. Almost. Instead, I shook my head quickly. "Sorry. Never mind." I pushed into the stairwell before she could say anything else and practically stumbled down the stairs. By the time I reached the parking lot, my hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice trying to unlock my car. I got inside and locked the doors immediately. Then I just sat there, breathing hard, staring straight ahead. My brain refused to process what I'd just seen. Ethan holding a child. Ethan laughing. Ethan being called Daddy. Over and over again. I felt numb for a second. Then furious. Then devastated. Then numb again. Because none of it made sense. We were 6 days away from getting married. 6 days. Our invitations were out. Our families were flying in. My dress was hanging in our closet right now. And the entire time, he had another apartment. Another woman, another child. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands. I should call him, scream at him, demand answers, but I couldn't, not yet, because a horrible thought had started creeping into my head. What if I still didn't know everything? What if what I saw tonight was only the part that slipped? I leaned forward against the steering wheel, trying not to cry. Then movement caught my eye. I looked up instantly. Ethan was exiting the building. Alone. He walked calmly across the parking lot, checking something on his phone like nothing in the world was wrong, like he wasn't living 2 completely different lives. I ducked lower instinctively, my heart hammering. He got into his car and drove away. I waited another 30 seconds before looking back toward the building. The apartment light upstairs was still on. And before I could stop myself, I made the worst decision possible. I got out of the car again, because I needed to know who she was, and whether she knew about me. The smart thing would have been leaving. Any sane person would have driven home, packed their things, called off the wedding, and disappeared before Ethan could even explain himself. But betrayal does something ugly to your brain. It doesn't just hurt you, it makes you desperate. Desperate to understand. Desperate to know how much of your life was fake. And standing in that parking lot, staring up at the warm light from that apartment window, I realized I couldn't leave yet. Not without answers. So I went back inside. My legs felt shaky climbing those stairs again, but the anger was finally starting to cut through the shock. Every step replayed another memory in my head. Every late night, every canceled dinner, every moment Ethan made me feel guilty for overthinking. Meanwhile, he was here, playing house, being somebody's father. By the time I reached the third floor again, the hallway was quiet. Too quiet. The apartment door was still cracked open slightly, but now I could hear softer sounds inside. Dishes clinking. The little girl laughing faintly somewhere deeper in the apartment. Domestic sounds. Normal sounds. That somehow hurt more than if I'd walked in on screaming or sex or chaos. Because this wasn't messy. It was settled. I stepped closer carefully, and before I could lose my nerve, I knocked. The sounds inside stopped immediately. Footsteps approached. Then the door opened wider. The woman froze when she saw me. Up close, she looked exhausted in a way makeup can't hide. Not messy, just tired, like someone carrying too much alone. Her eyes moved over me quickly, confused but polite. "Can I help you?" For a second I couldn't speak, because now she was real. Not just some blurry figure from a doorway. A real person. A woman standing in sweatpants holding a dish towel while the smell of pasta filled the apartment behind her. And suddenly I realized something horrifying. She looked comfortable, not guilty. Comfortable people don't know they're the other woman. My throat tightened. "I think I'm looking for Ethan." The moment his name left my mouth, her expression changed. Not panic. Recognition. "You mean Ethan Cole?" My stomach dropped. She knew his full name, not some fake version, not an alias. "Yes," I said carefully. A strange silence settled between us. Then she opened the door a little wider. "He just left," she said slowly. "Did you need something?" I stared at her, at the apartment behind her, at the little pink backpack sitting near the couch, at the framed photo on the shelf. Ethan, her, the little girl, Christmas lights in the background, family photo. My chest physically hurt, and then the little girl ran into view again. "Mom, where's—" She stopped when she saw me. Big brown eyes blinked up at me curiously, and then she smiled. "Hi." That smile almost broke me, because kids don't fake things. Kids don't lie smoothly the way adults do. She looked happy, safe, loved. The woman glanced back at her gently. "Lucy, baby, can you go finish your drawing for me?" Lucy groaned dramatically but disappeared back into the apartment. The woman looked at me again. "You okay?" she asked carefully. And that's when it hit me. She really didn't know. Or at least, she didn't know about me. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my face neutral. "You're his wife?" I asked quietly. The question seemed to catch her off guard. Then she laughed softly. "No," she said. "Not officially. Not officially." The air left my lungs. "But we've been together a long time," she added casually. "Why? A long time." I forced myself to breathe, because my brain was trying to calculate timelines now, and none of them made sense anymore. "How long?" I asked before I could stop myself. Her eyebrows pulled together slightly. "Sorry. Who are you exactly?" Think. "I work with him." I lied instantly. "I'm helping organize something for next week." Technically true. My wedding was next week. She relaxed slightly. "Oh, right." Then she smiled again. "He's been insane at work lately." I almost laughed. The audacity of it made me dizzy. "Yeah," I said hollowly. I noticed. She shifted against the doorframe, studying me more closely now. You sure you're okay? No, not even remotely. But before I could answer, her eyes drifted downward, to my left hand, to the engagement ring Ethan put there 8 months ago. The color drained from her face instantly, and everything changed. The silence between us became sharp, dangerous. Her eyes lifted slowly back to mine. Where did you get that? She asked quietly. I couldn't breathe for a second, because now she knew too, or at least part of it. I looked directly at her. He gave it to me. Her grip tightened on the door. No, she whispered automatically. I felt tears burning behind my eyes now, but anger held them back. Yes, the apartment suddenly felt colder. Neither of us moved. Neither of us blinked. And somewhere in the background, Lucy was humming to herself, completely unaware that both our lives had just detonated in the hallway. The woman shook her head slightly, like her brain physically refused to process what she was hearing. No, she repeated, weaker this time. No, he said. She stopped, and I saw it happen in real time. The unraveling. All the tiny moments she ignored suddenly connecting together. Late nights. Excuses. Distance. The exact same things I'd been excusing too. How long? She asked finally. Her voice sounded smaller now. I swallowed hard. 3 years. She actually stumbled backward slightly, like the answer hit her physically. No, she whispered again, and then quietly, almost to herself, we've been together 7. My knees nearly gave out. 7 years. I stared at her while my brain struggled to even hold that number, which meant he was with her first, long before me, long before our apartment, long before our engagement. I suddenly felt sick all over again, because I wasn't uncovering an affair. I was uncovering a life I accidentally interrupted. The woman pressed a hand over her mouth, eyes glossy now. Lucy is 6, she whispered. The words shattered something inside me. 6, meaning while Ethan was falling in love with me, while he was taking me on weekend trips and meeting my parents and talking about our future, he had a newborn daughter at home. I looked away because suddenly I couldn't stand seeing the apartment anymore. The family photos, the tiny shoes, the life he built while promising me another one. How long have you been engaged? She asked weakly. 8 months. She closed her eyes briefly, and then came the worst part. Not anger, not screaming, not accusations, just devastation, raw and quiet, because both of us realized the same thing at the exact same time. Neither of us knew who the real Ethan was. Then footsteps sounded behind her. Lucy appeared again, holding a drawing. Mom, look what She stopped, looking between us. The woman instantly wiped her face and forced a smile so fast it made my chest ache. That's beautiful, baby. Lucy looked confused. Why are you crying? The woman's lips trembled slightly. I'm okay. No, she wasn't. Neither of us were. Lucy looked at me again innocently. Are you Daddy's friend? The question sliced straight through me, and before I could answer, a phone started ringing inside the apartment. The woman turned automatically toward the kitchen counter, then froze, because we both knew exactly whose name was probably on that screen. The phone kept ringing, not loudly, not dramatically, just a normal ringtone sitting on a kitchen counter while 2 women silently realized their entire lives were built around the same lie. Neither of us moved at first. The woman, Emily, though I still didn't know her name yet, just stared toward the kitchen like if she ignored it long enough, reality might rewind itself. Lucy tugged lightly on her sleeve. Mom! That tiny voice snapped her back instantly. She swallowed hard and forced another shaky smile. Can you go wash your hands before bed, baby? Lucy looked between us again, confused by the tension she was too young to understand, but she nodded and disappeared down the hallway. The second she was gone, the woman's expression collapsed. Completely. She turned toward the kitchen slowly, grabbed the phone off the counter, and stared at the screen without answering. I didn't need to ask whose name was there. I already knew. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Then she showed it to me. Ethan Redheart. The little red heart next to his name made my stomach twist so violently I had to look away. "He's calling because he forgot his charger," she whispered numbly. "He always calls when he forgets something. Always." That word kept killing me. Always implied routine, consistency, history, a whole life. She declined the call. The apartment went quiet again. Then she looked at me directly for the first time since seeing my ring. "What's your name?" "Rachel." She nodded slowly, almost mechanically. "I'm Emily." We stood there in silence for another second before she stepped aside from the doorway. "Come in." I hesitated. Not because I was scared of her, because stepping into that apartment felt wrong. Intimate in a way I couldn't explain. Like entering evidence of a life I was never supposed to know existed. But I walked in anyway. The apartment was warm, comfortably warm. The kind of warmth created by people actually living somewhere together. There were little signs of routine everywhere. Lucy's crayons scattered across the coffee table. A tiny jacket hanging near the door. Takeout menus on the fridge with handwritten notes. Normal couple things. Normal family things. And Ethan was woven into every inch of it. I noticed his watch charger near the couch. One of his sweaters draped over a chair. A framed photo of him holding Lucy on his shoulders at a beach. The photo nearly shattered me, because he looked genuinely happy. Not forced. Not pretending. Happy. Emily noticed where I was looking and sat down slowly on the couch like her legs were giving out beneath her. "He told me he was working late tonight," she said quietly. I almost laughed again at how pathetic the sentence sounded now. "He told me the same thing," I replied. Her eyes closed briefly, and for the first time since I got there, anger finally flashed across her face. Not at me, at him. "How?" she whispered. "How do you do this for years?" I didn't answer because I honestly didn't know. Ethan wasn't sloppy. That was the terrifying part. This wasn't some idiot getting caught in random lies. This was organized, careful, calculated, which meant he'd built systems for it. Schedules, excuses, timelines. My brain suddenly replayed every weird moment I ignored over the last 3 years. Every canceled weekend. Every unexplained trip. Every time he needed space to focus. God, he wasn't balancing work stress. He was balancing us. Emily rubbed a hand over her face, staring at the floor. I thought he was pulling away because of money. What? She laughed weakly, bitterly. The last year he's been distant. Not cold exactly, just distracted. She looked around the apartment. He said work was getting more demanding, that he was trying to get us into a better place. The word hit hard, because while he was promising me a future, he was promising her one too. My eyes drifted toward the hallway where Lucy disappeared. Does she know? Emily's face immediately tightened. No. The answer came fast, protective. She adores him, she whispered. He's a good father. I looked at the beach photo again, and that's what made this so horrifying. He probably was. That's the part nobody talks about with people like Ethan. It would be easier if he were completely evil, cruel, manipulative all the time. But men like him survive because they're good in pieces. Good enough to make you doubt your instincts. Good enough to make the lies feel impossible. Emily stood suddenly and walked toward the kitchen like she physically couldn't sit still anymore. "I need a drink." She opened the fridge and grabbed a bottle of white wine with shaking hands. Then paused. Her eyes locked onto the label, and something changed in her expression. Confusion first, then realization, then horror. "What?" I asked carefully. She slowly turned the bottle toward me. My stomach dropped instantly, because I recognized the vineyard name. My family's vineyard. The one my parents owned in Napa. Special reserve bottles. Not sold in stores. Only gifted to family and close friends. I stared at it while cold realization crawled up my spine. "That's impossible." I whispered. Emily looked pale now. He brought it home last Christmas, she said slowly. Said it came from a client. No. I grabbed the bottle from her hands, staring at the handwritten note attached near the neck. To Ethan and Rachel, can't wait for the wedding. Love, Mom and Dad. I physically stopped breathing, because that bottle was meant for us. For our apartment. Not this one. Emily stared at me while the realization hit both of us simultaneously. He was mixing the lives together now, making mistakes. The room suddenly felt too small. He brought gifts from your parents here? Emily whispered. I couldn't answer, because my brain was replaying Christmas now. Ethan claiming one of the wine bottles must have broken during shipping. He even acted annoyed about it. Meanwhile, it had been sitting in this apartment the entire time. My legs felt weak. How many times? I whispered to myself. How many accidental overlaps had there been? How many lies was he juggling every single day? Emily leaned heavily against the counter. I feel sick. Yeah. The apartment went silent again except for the hum of the refrigerator. Then Emily suddenly looked at me sharply. Does he know you're here? I shook my head immediately. No. Good. The answer came fast. Too fast. Her expression hardened slightly for the first time all night. He can't know. I frowned. Why? She looked toward Lucy's hallway instinctively before lowering her voice. Because if Ethan realizes we know, he'll control the situation. The certainty in her tone caught me off guard. You sound very sure about that. A strange look crossed her face. Not fear exactly. Recognition. Then she laughed once under her breath. Because I've seen him do it before. My stomach tightened. What does that mean? Emily hesitated. And suddenly I realized there were things she knew about Ethan that I didn't. Years worth of things. The thought terrified me. She sat back down slowly, gripping the wine bottle tightly. About 2 years ago, she said quietly, I found messages on his laptop from another woman. I stared at her. Another woman. Not me. Another one. He convinced me I was paranoid, she whispered. He cried. Said I was the only person he ever wanted. Said work stress was making him distant. She laughed bitterly. Then somehow I ended up apologizing to him. That sounded exactly like Ethan. Painfully exactly. He's very good at making you question yourself, I said quietly. Emily nodded slowly. That's why we can't confront him emotionally. The word hung in the air between us. Not enemies. Not rivals. Something else now. 2 women standing in the wreckage of the same man. Then her phone buzzed again. Another call from Ethan. Neither of us moved. But this time, Emily smiled. Not warmly, not kindly, a dangerous smile. And for the first time all night, I realized something important. Ethan had lied to both of us for years. But tonight, he had absolutely no idea we were finally in the same room. I didn't leave Emily's apartment until almost 2 in the morning. Not because we trusted each other. Not because we suddenly became friends. But because once the truth finally cracked open, neither of us could stop pulling at it. Every conversation uncovered another lie. Another overlap. Another version of Ethan we didn't recognize. And the worst part? The timelines kept getting uglier. Emily sat curled into the corner of the couch with a blanket around her shoulders while I stared at old photos spread across the coffee table like evidence in a murder case. Because that's what it felt like. Like investigating the death of our own reality. This was Aspen, Emily said quietly, pointing at one picture. 3 winters ago. I looked down at it. Ethan smiling in a ski jacket, arm wrapped around her waist while Lucy sat on his shoulders. 3 winters ago. I swallowed hard. Because 3 winters ago, Ethan had told me he was in Chicago for a finance conference. I remembered that week clearly. I remembered crying in our apartment because he barely answered my texts. Meanwhile, he'd been building snowmen with another family. My stomach turned violently. Emily rubbed at her eyes. How did he even manage this? I laughed once under my breath. Not because it was funny, because my brain physically couldn't process the logistics anymore. How many lies do you have to tell every day to maintain something like this? She didn't answer. Neither of us really could. The apartment had gone quiet except for the hum of traffic outside and Lucy sleeping down the hallway. At some point, Emily poured more wine neither of us actually drank. We just held the glasses while staring at pieces of Ethan's double life laid out across the table. Then I noticed something strange in one of the photos. Wait! Emily looked up. I pointed toward Ethan's wrist. The watch. Same silver watch he always wore. Except the date on the bottom of the printed photo made my chest tighten. Emily. This was the same weekend he proposed to me. Her expression froze. What? I grabbed my phone instantly and pulled up the proposal pictures. Beachside restaurant. Sunset. Ethan on one knee. And there it was. The same watch. Same shirt. Same haircut. I looked between the pictures while cold realization spread through both of us. He was here with you the day before, I whispered. Emily stared at the dates in disbelief. No! He drove straight from here to propose to me. The room went completely silent, because somehow every new discovery managed to feel worse than the last one. Emily leaned back against the couch slowly like she might faint. Oh my God! I remembered that proposal perfectly. How emotional Ethan seemed. How his voice shook slightly while telling me he couldn't imagine his future without me. And now all I could think about was him driving from this apartment to that beach carrying two completely different lives in his head. How do you even fake emotions like that? I whispered. Emily looked toward the hallway instinctively. I don't think he was faking all of them. That answer sat heavy between us. Because that's what made Ethan terrifying. He probably did love us. In different ways. At different times. Just enough to justify destroying both of us. I stood suddenly because sitting still felt impossible now. My body buzzed with restless anger. I need air. Emily nodded weakly. I stepped onto the small apartment balcony overlooking the parking lot. Cold night air hit my face instantly, but it didn't calm anything down. Below me, the city moved normally. Cars passing. People laughing somewhere down the block. Meanwhile, my entire life had detonated 6 hours earlier. I gripped the railing tightly, trying not to cry again. That's when I noticed something. A black SUV parked across the street. At first, it didn't seem important. But then I realized it had been there since I arrived. Headlights off. Engine running. I frowned slightly. Maybe I was becoming paranoid. But something about it felt wrong. Then the driver's side door opened, and a man stepped out. Tall, dark jacket, phone pressed to his ear. Even from this distance, my stomach dropped instantly. Ethan. What the hell? I stepped backward instinctively. Why was he here? He wasn't looking toward the apartment building directly. He was pacing near the SUV, talking aggressively into his phone. Then Emily stepped onto the balcony behind me. What happened? I pointed silently. The second she saw him, all the color drained from her face. He's been outside this whole time? Apparently. Ethan stopped pacing suddenly and looked toward the building. Toward us. My chest tightened violently, because even from across the street, I knew that expression. Calm on the surface, dangerous underneath. He raised the phone slowly back to his ear, and inside the apartment, Emily's phone started ringing. Neither of us moved. The ringing echoed faintly from inside. Again, again, again. Emily looked terrified now. Don't answer it, I whispered. She nodded immediately. The ringing stopped. Across the street, Ethan stared at the building for another long second before lowering his phone slowly. Then, he smiled. Not warmly, not kindly. A tiny controlled smile, like he already knew. My blood ran cold. He knows, Emily whispered, and deep down, I knew she was right. Not because he saw us clearly, because Ethan noticed everything. The unanswered calls, my missing location, the timing. Something had tipped him off, and now he was calculating. The terrifying thing about Ethan wasn't anger. It was composure. Even now, after years of lies potentially collapsing around him, he wasn't panicking. He was thinking, planning. Emily grabbed my arm suddenly. "You need to go." I looked at her. "What? If he sees your car here?" "Too late, probably." "No," her voice sharpened. "Rachel, listen to me." The intensity caught me off guard. "He cannot control both conversations at once," she said quickly. "That's the only reason we still have clarity right now." My chest tightened, because she was right. Separate, he could manipulate us individually. Together, the lies stopped working. "He'll divide this if he can," Emily continued. "He'll tell you I'm crazy. He'll tell me you're unstable. He'll create versions until one of us breaks." The fact she understood him that clearly terrified me. "How do you know?" Emily's expression darkened. "Because I've watched him do it to people before." Before I could ask what she meant, the car door slammed below us. We both looked down instantly. Ethan was crossing the street now, heading toward the building. Fast. My pulse exploded. "Oh my God!" Emily grabbed my wrist immediately and pulled me back inside. "Back in trance," she said quickly. "What about you?" "I'll handle him." "No way." She looked directly at me. "For Lucy." That stopped me, because suddenly this wasn't just about betrayal anymore. There was a child asleep in the next room who still believed Ethan was her safe place. Emily moved quickly through the apartment, grabbing my purse and keys. "You need time before he talks to you." "What about you?" A sad smile crossed her face. "I've had 7 years with him," she whispered. "I know how to survive a conversation." A loud knock hit the apartment door. Both of us froze instantly. Then came Ethan's voice. Calm, controlled. "Emily?" The sound of him that close made my stomach twist violently. Another knock. "Emily, open the door." She shoved my keys into my hands and pointed toward the kitchen. "Go. Now." I hesitated. Not because I wanted to stay, because leaving her alone with him suddenly felt dangerous in a way I couldn't explain. The knocking came again, harder this time. "Emily." She looked at me one last time, and for the first time all night, there was genuine fear in her eyes. Not fear of him hurting her. Fear of him talking, manipulating, rewriting reality. "Don't let him speak to you alone," she whispered. Then the apartment door handle started turning. The back stairwell smelled like dust and rain. I stumbled down it too fast, nearly missing a step because my hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the railing. Above me, muffled through layers of concrete and walls, I could still hear Ethan knocking. Not yelling, not angry. That calm voice somehow terrified me more. "Emily." Another knock, then silence. I reached the bottom floor and pushed through the back exit into the alley behind the building. Cold night air hit my face hard enough to sting, but it didn't slow my heartbeat. I kept moving, past dumpsters, past overflowing trash bags, past the flickering yellow security light near the parking area. I didn't stop until I reached my car. Then I locked the doors immediately and sat there gasping for breath, staring at the apartment building through the windshield. My phone buzzed. Ethan. The name on the screen made nausea roll through me instantly. I declined the call. 3 seconds later, another call. Then another. Then a text. "Rachel, please answer." Another one immediately after. "This is not what you think." I actually laughed out loud at that. Not because it was funny, because it was such a pathetic sentence compared to the scale of what he'd done. "Not what I think. I saw your daughter call you daddy. I saw family photos. I saw the apartment." There was no alternate explanation left. Another text appeared. "Where are you?" Then another. "Did you go to Emily's apartment?" My chest tightened instantly. So he knew, or at least suspected. I stared at the messages while anger slowly replaced the panic. For years, Ethan controlled every narrative around him, every version of reality, every explanation, and somehow, until tonight, nobody had compared notes. That was his entire system. Isolation. Keep people separated and the lies survive. I looked back toward the building. One apartment light was still on upstairs. Emily. My stomach twisted with guilt. I should leave. I should go home, lock the door, call off the wedding, disappear from this entire nightmare. But I couldn't stop thinking about the look in her eyes before I left. Fear. Not fear of violence. Fear of being manipulated again. And suddenly I realized something horrifying. Ethan was probably upstairs right now trying to rebuild the narrative. Trying to regain control. Trying to split us apart before we could compare everything. My jaw tightened. No, not this time. I grabbed my phone and texted Emily immediately. Are you okay? No response. 30 seconds. Nothing. Then suddenly, my driver's side door opened. I screamed. Ethan slid into the passenger seat before I could react, shutting the door quickly behind him. What the hell is wrong with you? I shouted, scrambling backward against the door. Rachel, calm down. That calm tone again. Controlled. Measured. Like we were discussing dinner plans instead of his second family. How did you find me? You left in a hurry, he said quietly. Your headlights gave you away. I stared at him in disbelief. Even now he looked composed. Tie loosened slightly, sleeves rolled up, eyes focused entirely on me like he could still manage this. Like he still believed he could talk his way out. My chest burned with rage. You're insane. Rachel. No, my voice cracked sharply. You do not get to use that calm voice right now. He exhaled slowly, rubbing one hand across his jaw. And for the first time since I'd met him, he looked tired. Not guilty. Tired. I wanted to tell you. I laughed again, harsher this time. Sure you did. I did. When? After the honeymoon? Before or after I accidentally became your daughter's stepmom? Pain flashed across his face briefly. Real pain. And somehow that made me even angrier. Because it meant he genuinely cared enough to hurt. Which meant every lie was intentional. I never meant for this to happen like this, he said quietly. Like what? Me finding out your entire life is fake. His jaw tightened slightly. Not fake. That answer stunned me for a second. Because he sounded sincere. I love you. The words landed like poison. I stared at him, then shook my head slowly. You don't get to say that. It's true. You have another family. I know. You have a child. I know. You proposed to me while going home to someone else. His eyes closed briefly. I know. The quiet acceptance of it made my skin crawl. Not defensive. Not denying it. Just acknowledging it like a tragic scheduling problem. How long were you planning this? I whispered. He looked out through the windshield for a second before answering. I wasn't planning anything. Bullshit. I met you and everything got complicated. I physically recoiled. Complicated? That's the word he chose? You had years to stop this. I tried. The answer came instantly, and for the first time, I heard something crack beneath his composure. I tried ending things with Emily. My stomach twisted violently. Wow. She was pregnant. I looked away immediately because suddenly breathing felt difficult again. And then Lucy was born, he continued quietly. And every time I thought about leaving, I couldn't. You should have thought about that before starting another relationship. I know. Again with the calm acceptance, like he'd rehearsed guilt. I looked at him sharply. Did she know about me? No. Did anyone? No. I stared at him, then asked the question that had been haunting me all night. Who were you actually planning to marry? That finally broke him a little. His expression shifted. Not dramatically, but enough. Because for the first time he didn't have an answer. The silence stretched painfully between us. And suddenly I understood. He never decided. That was the truth. He kept both lives going because choosing meant becoming the villain in one of them. So instead, he became the villain in both. You're pathetic, I whispered. The words hit harder than yelling ever could. He swallowed slowly. You think I don't know that? I looked toward the apartment building again. What did Emily say? A long pause followed. Then he laughed once under his breath. Humorless. She threw a wine bottle at me. I blinked. What? She missed. Despite everything, a tiny disbelieving laugh escaped me. Ethan nodded faintly. Lucy woke up crying. The mention of Lucy killed the moment instantly, because that little girl didn't deserve any of this. None of this was her fault. And suddenly the anger gave way to something heavier. Exhaustion. Grief. The realization that there wasn't going to be some satisfying ending here. No perfect revenge. No clean closure. Just damage. Real human damage. I loved you, I whispered. Ethan looked at me immediately. I know. No tears finally spilled down my face. You don't. Because loving someone honestly and loving someone selfishly are not the same thing. And Ethan had spent years confusing the two. I wiped my face angrily. The wedding's over. His expression tightened slightly, but he nodded. I figured. My parents are going to hate you. I know. My brother might actually hit you. A weak breath escaped him. Probably fair. I shook my head slowly. The worst part? He still sounded rational. Human. Which somehow made this tragedy feel even uglier. Because monsters would have been easier. But Ethan was just a weak man who wanted two lives and convinced himself he could carry both forever. Until they finally collided. My phone buzzed suddenly. Emily. I answered instantly. Are you okay? Her voice sounded exhausted. Yeah. I closed my eyes briefly in relief. Then she spoke again. He told me he loved both of us. I glanced sideways at Ethan. He looked away immediately. Emily laughed bitterly through the phone. Can you believe that? Honestly, yes. That was the problem. Could. Because people like Ethan don't understand that love without honesty eventually becomes destruction. Emily's voice softened slightly. Lucy keeps asking where he went. That sentence hit all over again. I swallowed hard. I'm sorry. There was a long silence. Then quietly, Emily said something I'll probably think about for the rest of my life. He didn't just cheat on us, she whispered. He stole years we can't get back. My chest tightened painfully, because that was the real tragedy. Not the lies themselves. The time. The futures we built around someone who was never fully there. I know, I whispered back. After we hung up, the car went silent. Ethan stared forward. I stared at the steering wheel. And somewhere during that silence, I realized something important. I wasn't grieving the man sitting beside me. I was grieving the version of him I invented. The safe version. The honest version. The future I thought was waiting for me. That version never existed. Finally, I looked at him one last time. You need to leave. He nodded slowly. Then he opened the car door. But before stepping out, he paused. I did love you, Rachel. I stared straight ahead. Maybe, I said quietly, but not enough to tell the truth. Then he left. I watched him walk back toward the apartment building alone. No composure left now. No control. Just a man finally forced to stand inside the damage he created. And for the first time all night, I didn't follow him. I drove away. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do isn't exposing someone. It's refusing to let their lies become your future. If this story hooked you, comment what you would have done in my place. And subscribe because the next story is even more insane.